Well, hello and welcome, everybody. I am bringing you a wonderful interview today where we're going to be talking about burnout, but from the perspective of the corporate world. So if you're either working in a job and you're worried about burning out, or maybe you're actually running a company and you're concerned about burnout for your employees, then there's going to be plenty of brilliant tips in here for you to enjoy. Now, I'm Katie Dean, and I created the company Find My Energy to help people recover from burnout, from chronic fatigue syndrome, or actually better still, just avoid getting to that point in the first place. And I'm here today with Nicola Richardson, the people mentor. And as I say, we're going to have a lovely chat about mentoring in business and burnout and all things related. So, Nicola, thank you for being here. And I'd love you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you for the invite. I'm the people mentor, and it started off as a management consultancy. And I trained to be a professional consultant because I was very adamant that I wanted to know exactly how you did proper professional consulting. And from there, I then added leadership management mentoring, because when I was in the workplace, I used to mentor a lot of managers, particularly middle managers who wanted to get on with their careers, but perhaps were struggling with aspects of management and team dynamics. So I would do that. And it's kind of all fitted together because, as well, when I was in the business world, I would often get asked or even told sometimes to go in and troubleshoot teams where they were having problems, to find out what was going on. And that actually fits with my management consultancy element as well. So it's kind of a mix, that holistic thing around management and leadership. And then that affects the team. And that means that your team is higher performing and want to go that extra mile. And I think that's really important, wanting to go that extra mile, because people have got to be happy to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, happiness in the workplace is often underrated, I feel. So you've talked about mentoring. You obviously are the people mentor. Could we just frame this? Could you tell us exactly what you mean by mentoring, what that looks like?
Yeah, so it's a relationship orientated practice where a more experienced or knowledgeable person guides a less experienced or less knowledgeable person. I tend to do a mix of mentoring and coaching. So there are times when I think it's applicable that you ask questions, searching questions to get people thinking. But I've been in situations where I've been really stuck, and despite the fact that they think you've got the answer within you, sometimes you just haven't. And so sometimes it's great to have a mentor for that aspect of, well, I've tried this and it's worked, or I've done that and that didn't work. And I think it's important to share the bits that have failed as the bits that you've gone well. It's not all about that goes well, because the lessons come from the bits of failure, I always think. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant thing to remember, because we're sort of brought up in society that failure is something to be afraid of and is shameful, and it's not. You get your biggest growth from failure. So, I mean, is there a difference between coaching and mentoring?
Yeah, mentoring, you're more likely to give advice. You're going to suggest options. So I always make it a rule that I don't just give one option, I suggest several, because what might feel good for me might not feel good for another person. So it's about understanding that if you give them several options and you explain what you're thinking behind that, that also helps them grow and develop as well.
Yeah.
Coaching, maybe if I think they've got the answer within them, then I'll ask them, and then if they're stuck, then I would move to my mentoring. But usually people need a mix. I don't think one stands on its own. And I have had leadership coaching in the past when I was really struggling with a micromanager. Didn't realize at the time that was my problem. I just lacked confidence. And I actually had it for my business, which had started, but it helped me so much in my employed role. It was really outstanding. And what was key was that it came back that I'd got this micromanager, which I'd never really identified, but they were zapping my confidence. And I felt really poorly at the time. And I had a colleague as well who was in the same position, and he just couldn't cope with it. And he had outbursts. And in the end, he just asked to be moved. And luckily he could get moved. And then that left me with this person. And it was an interesting journey, because the manager knew that there was something not right, and he'd had all this conversation with the other person. Luckily, the other person had told me, and he said, you know, do you think I micromanage? And I thought, I've got to be truthful. So I said, yeah, you do, but this is why I think you do it, and I think you need to look at yourself and do some development. I wouldn't say he took it 100% well. And did he really learn? No, because he wasn't open to it. You've got to be open to mentoring and coaching, and that's the biggest difference. If you're not prepared to put the work in, if you're not prepared to take the actions and put that energy into it, it's never going to work.
No, 100%. I mean, I find that in my line of work as well. It's, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, as the old saying goes.
Exactly.
And it's very true. And actually wonderful that this is something you're doing naturally in your own, for yourself too, and those around you. So, I mean, obviously we've talked a little bit about one-on-one mentoring, but I know you also work in teams. So how does that differ, or what are the overlaps there?
So that's more management consultancy. So I will go into a business if they have got issues going on and they know there's something wrong, but they're often too close to it to see what's actually going on. And this all goes back to when I used to go in and troubleshoot teams. So I then did the professional consulting training and realized that what I'd been doing sort of fitted with that. So you tend to go in, you you observe a lot,
right?
And that's really key. And you listen to conversations going on, you look at documentation, and you'll ask to look at like things like team meeting notes, and you'll look at, have they got any staff survey results? What are they telling you? And things like that. Look at there. And one of the key things that often don't get looked at are the stats around retention, staff retention, how many people are actually leaving, sick absence. And I'm sure that you kind of think about this in your element of work as well. How high is the sick absence? How high is the sudden absences as well? And the ones where they go AWOL. And I've seen people go AWOL. And if you're a good business, you'll try and get in touch with them. You have a duty of care to do that. But it often doesn't get looked at deep enough to find out what's going on, especially if you're getting a few of them doing it. Look at your instances going on around bullying and things like that. So I look at all of that, and then I come up with a plan. If I need to, I will do interviews. But a lot of people really struggle opening up in interviews because they're frightened of what's going to go back. And everything that's said to me is confidential and gets anonymized anyway. So I often use surveys as well, because I think they're really important, because they are anonymous and they can feel they can write what they want in a better way. So
wonderful. That's a huge range of tools, and I'm guessing that brings some great successes. So I mean, is there any success stories that particularly stick in your mind for any reason?
I did work with one client and worked for them for about 18 months, and I would go in monthly. So we assessed together what was going on in the business, and there was very much about a bit of a clique, people being left out. And also they needed things standardizing as well, that came out in all the conversations. And the main person was very underconfident. So I went in on a monthly basis for half a day and had conversations with the supervisor every time I went in, set him some tasks to do. We'd decide what he needed to do for the next month. And his confidence really grew.
Wow.
And the team started to gel better together. And actually what happened over time was they actually lost one team member, and they actually made some savings of that salary, and they actually started to work much more efficiently because we also looked at the processes. So I will go in and do things like continuous improvement as well. So looking at the processes, mapping them, how could you do this better? How can we get rid of waste in it? Problem solving, and all of those tools help people feel engaged and listened to because you involve the team, and that's really important. That makes a huge difference. When people feel listened to, then they feel like it's worth staying and they feel valued.
Yeah, it's so important. And that all sets up a lovely framework. So we're getting a beautiful sense of how you work with individuals, with teams. And I'd love now to sort of turn our attention more specifically to the burnout question, because it is a big issue in modern life. And it is something that a lot of individuals experience. And also the more awake and aware companies are thinking about this and trying to think about how they can support and prevent this, because it's really in no one's interests. So, I mean, are there any ways in which you would look for anything that you use to identify when burnout is a problem or is likely to become a problem?
Funnily enough, I've done a podcast on this recently,
Okay.
on my my series, because I think it's a really important subject, especially in this time and this age. And if I just stop for a minute and just say that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, we had a lot more roles than we actually have now. So people have downsized their staff in a lot of cases. In the public sector particularly, jobs were reduced and you felt under immense pressure, and you would be doing the equivalent of 2 people's work. So you have that. Then we have change, and it's very volatile, very uncertain. We don't know a lot of things and they just get thrown at us. So you add all that, and that immediately puts pressure on and starts to lead to burnout, in my view. So I think the signs are, from my point of view, is to look at behavior that is different from what the person normally is. And I think that's a really key one. And listen to what they're telling you. If they're dropping in little hints like, I'm not sleeping well at night, or, you know, maybe even they're comfort eating, or I just don't feel like eating at the moment. They're all things that are telling you that you need to have a conversation with that person and find a way of supporting them. So I think, and I always use this, be curious about the person. And if something feels slightly not quite right, still have that conversation, because if you can get in there earlier, you're going to stop it escalating.
Oh, amen to that. I mean, it's my own experience was complete burnout, and it was, I mean, I take my own portion of responsibility in not speaking up for whatever reason, but equally management were quite blind to what was going on, so didn't also take steps to step in at any point. So it is very much about recognizing that there's a dual responsibility going on. It's not just down to the individual. Management needs to be aware. So, I mean, with that in mind, are there particular things that you would suggest that businesses can do if they're concerned?
So I think there are some things, depending whether you're hybrid, you know, working completely remotely, in the office. If you're in the office and, you know, you're within vicinity of your employees, walk around daily, have a conversation with them. It doesn't have to be long, but often just that conversation can tell you if something's going on. And I can remember I used to come into work every day and shout hello. It's a bit like back at school in a way, because they'd all shout hello back at me. And apparently that was one of the things they really loved, which staggered me. But just acknowledging that, you know, I was in, and hey, how are you all, sort of thing. And then I'd walk the floor, and I'd try and do it every day, because you could pick up so much, because if it creates that openness, so people will open up and tell you. And it was the little things. I can remember walking past somebody and she said hello, and I'm like, that's not her normal hello. So I went over to a desk and I said, you all right? You say, no, I'm not actually. I'm really upset. I've just returned from work and my manager hasn't even returned from sick. My manager hasn't even acknowledged that I've been off sick and checked that I'm okay to be back in. It's just that fact of being valued, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's those little things that start to add up in people. And when you get worlds clashing, like work and personal, they don't really stand much chance, do they?
No,
So
no. I mean, we've all got a lot going on, and obviously you want, adequate boundaries in place. You don't need your personal spilling into your work or your work into your personal, but at the same time, we are whole people, and you can't completely separate out the two. So, I mean, that's just a lovely ethos to create that open atmosphere. Are there any other tools?
yeah, and when you're well, I was going to say when you're working remotely, have a daily performance board meeting where you discuss what's on for the day, what you're trying to achieve. If daily seems too much, that's okay, but try to do it 2 or 3 times a week. It doesn't have to be long, 15 minutes, but you're doing it remotely. Listen to what people are saying, listen to their tones. And if you hear somebody's just not quite right, phone them afterwards. They're not going to tell you, or just ping them a little direct message saying, are you okay? Shall I give you a call later? And just so that they know somebody's there for them. And that's the first thing I would say. And then the other thing I think about is staff surveys as well. If you're not doing a staff survey, it'd be a really good idea to do one and just get the anonymised feedback, because that will often tell you. I've seen smiley faces put up. That doesn't work. Really doesn't work. Please don't go down that line. So we had a thing where you had a smiley face, okay-ish face and a down face. And we were supposed to, as a team, put what we were once a week. And it was supposed to be completely anonymised. And then we were supposed to put any comments if you think. But you could actually see, because it was a document, you could tell who had done what. And it just made it inconsequential because it was just faces. And was anybody really interested? It needs to be more of a discussion. So have team meetings where you breed that openness, where people can say, and that's what, as a team, I co-worked with somebody else, co-leading, and we did that so that we'd have discussions where it wasn't necessarily about work, but we were opening the avenues to discussing topics that were around mental health, were around burnout and things like that, so that people could really open up and share. And some people didn't want to, and that was fine, because what you do is then you perhaps pick it off on a one-to-one to check that they're okay. But if you're not having those conversations, then you're going to have problems.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also important to remember the follow through, that the conversation actually has to have consequences. It's not enough to just say to somebody, oh, how do you feel? And they say, oh, I feel rubbish, and then you ignore it. It is, as you've said over and over, about making people feel valued and feel part of the team and feel like they're invested in what the business as a whole is trying to achieve. So
that's right, you're right, and it is about the follow through. So, I mean, one of the things I've seen work really well and I've used is when I went into an environment where it felt somewhat toxic, and after talking to the managers, we knew there was something wrong, but we didn't know what was wrong. So we took the teams one by one and did a stress risk assessment with them as a team. So they did an anonymised survey with specific questions. We then RAG status them, so red, amber, green. What were the most important ones to deal with? What were the next? And even some of the green ones were like on that list. And then we took them as a team to thrash out, we discussed, this is what the survey is saying, how are we going to resolve it? It didn't mean that the managers had to do the actions or I had to do the actions. This was about the team owning it. And it's interesting because it does allow people to open up in an anonymised way. And then once they feel it's safe, if you're really listening to them and you're coming up with actions that are going to happen and then you follow through on them, people then start to trust you enough to tell you when there's a real problem.
Yeah, no, that's another important issue, the trust, and it is building that two-way
Yeah.
trust. Yes. Do you ever advise on tools like, I don't know, bringing in yoga or meditations or those sort of
Yeah.
relaxation type tools?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working, we had what they called a wellbeing team.
Right.
And so we had a wellbeing team and there was a people team within our part. And I was on the people one, and about leadership and all of that, interestingly. And then we had some of the team would be on the wellbeing team. And so they would come out with initiatives. And I can remember one team meeting, and it was really interesting. The lady was a yoga teacher outside of work. So
Okay.
she came in and she said, shall we do some meditation before we start the team meeting? And we all worked remotely and had got together. And all the women said, yeah, not a problem. All the men were very, not so sure about this. And so she said, well, close your eyes. So I closed my eyes and then I just peeked and all the men had still got theirs open. And it was fascinating that how different they reacted to the thought of doing meditation in a team meeting.
Yeah.
But it was a great start because it kind of diffused any tensions and really helped it go in the right way.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I mean, I'm definitely very much in favor of meditation. And I will just say also in defense of the men, I do now know plenty who willingly meditate. I mean, in fact, an old boss of mine at work, I mean, it's going back years, was having his own health issues and ended up finding resolution through meditation.
Yeah, it
A lot
doesn't
of that
surprise
was
me.
stress related. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was more a kind of feeling embarrassed, whereas they probably
Yes.
would have done it if they'd been on their own.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's not against men. It's just that it was quite stark the difference, and it might have been different in a different team because
Yes.
they were. Yeah, it was just the way they reacted, and I think if they'd been on their own, they might well have done it.
Yeah, yes. I mean, that's the thing. It's a different dynamic when you're in a team environment and being asked to do, and it's being asked to do something new as well can be challenging
Yeah,
for any of us.
exactly.
So let's just flip this around. On the other side, what if a company chooses to ignore, knows that there's a burnout issue or stress related issues and thinks, well, I'm just going to ignore this. What's that going to do to the company?
So one that doesn't often get discussed is reputation. If they think it's not going to get out there, they're wrong.
Right.
I think you only have to, is it glass tap? You only have to look at some of the comments on there sometimes about employers. So not everybody writes on there by any means, but just think about if this starts to escalate in the team and in the business, then it'll get out and it'll be discussed and it'll spread, and then you'll have trouble recruiting, keeping people. You potentially could end up in an employment tribunal because you haven't done the right things at the right time. You have a duty of care, and people forget that. So to me, what often gets missed is the reputation, let alone the keeping your staff or your sick absence going up or unexplained absence. These are all things that contribute to your performance of your business going down the pan.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing around that as well is if when people feel stressed and burned out, they're not going to be creative. They're not going to be innovative. So what happens is your business almost stagnates. And that's not good for you because you've got to be forward looking all the time and looking what's out there and how do I need to adapt? What do I need to do different? Because we're fast paced about change. So there's so many aspects of it and it gets missed most of the time.
Yes, it can be brushed under the carpet. It's just a little inconvenience that is less important than focusing on the bottom line or the next product, and not realizing that actually that creates the bottom line and creates the next new product success. Yeah.
And when you've got people being burnt out and stressed, maybe it's only one or two to start with, but that's one or two too many. And that knock-on effect is that the people in the team are carrying that work then. And then they're starting to go under pressure and feeling stressed, and they're starting to crumble. So it's a knock-on effect. It's a bit like the 10 green bottles on the wall, isn't it? They
Yeah.
all slowly start falling off.
Yes.
And so it's really important that the minute you start to see signs like that, you deal with it. You
Yeah.
look at the person's workload, you look at what's the underlying issue. And to be honest, I would do a stress risk assessment with that person. I still think that's a good place to start, because then you can find out what's really sitting behind it all with the questions that you use. And then from there, you can come up with a plan of action to help them and support.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, hopefully we're moving into a world now where stress isn't quite such a dirty word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I can remember 20 years ago being really stressed, and you just didn't admit it.
No.
Because it would hold your career back, and that was so wrong.
Yes.
So wrong.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, for anyone now who is watching this and who is either running their own business or maybe managing a team, and they're thinking, actually, Nicola's got some really great stuff here. You know, I know we said you work with both individuals and with teams. Is there a better way to start this? I mean, is it better to start looking at the individual level, or better to start at the team level, or does it vary?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I really think it depends on the circumstances.
Right.
I think as a business, you need to look, first of all, at your sick absence records, your retention records. And if you're seeing a little bit of a trend, then you need to do work as a business, as the teams together.
Okay.
If you're seeing that it's something around one person who is leading, who is perhaps alienating people, perhaps is feeling underconfident, then that's an individual basis.
Okay.
But when you can start to see that the ripples are going across the business, you need to take action for the business, and to protect it and to help it develop as well. It's a really interesting one, because I did work with somebody a while back, and it's not often I have to put my hands up, but they'd been told by their manager, their lead, that they needed to do leadership mentoring. And it was fascinating. We did a DISC profile, because I always start with a DISC profile, because it's really insightful. It's not going to always be spot on, but it has enough of the elements in there to give you an idea about yourself, probably the bits that are even hidden, a lot of them. And it tells you about your strengths, it tells you about your areas where you need to improve or think of different ways of working. And it kind of just gives you that overview to give you a good starting block. And this person said, no, that's not me. That's totally not me. And I think I should have spotted the warning signs at that point. Right. So we had a session, and what came out clearly was that they had an issue around how they spoke to their staff, and that they were treating them like the parent-child, the transactional model.
Okay.
But she wouldn't accept it. So at the end of the day, I sort of got blanked, and she didn't want to carry on. And I think that I saw all the warning signs. So the person has got to be ready for it. So if you're suggesting as a business that you want somebody to go on leadership mentoring, then you really need to make sure that they're on board, they understand why, and they accept that why, and if they're receptive to it, and they're willing to take the actions that they need to take. Because it's not about we have a conversation, they go away and they do nothing. They've got to take the actions that come out of that meeting. And that's really important. If you want to make progress, if you want to develop your career, if you want to be a great leader, you know, if you want to get your family and your work life right, you've got to take the actions that we talk about. And in this case, the person didn't want to do it, quite obviously. And, you know, it was really sad, but you have to accept that there are occasions where you can't make that difference because they're not in the right headspace, and you've got to let them go away until they reach whatever it is, rock bottom, whatever it is that prompts them to want to do something, and then they'll do it then.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that circles back to what we were saying earlier about you've got to be ready and willing to make the change. And I see the same in my work now, health coaching. It's the same. You can't expect a coach or a mentor to come in and do the work for you. they're just giving you a prod and creating a supportive environment that allows you to grow.
No, that's really true, because last year I had health issues,
Right.
and I realised I needed to get my weight in a better position, and I did really well for up to Christmas, and then something slips, and you've got to be right in your head, and I'm trying to get my head back in that right space. So it is, isn't it? It's about having that willpower almost to do things, to make things happen, and in the right headspace, definitely. And if you're not, then be honest with yourself. That's the first thing that's important. Be honest.
Well, then it's actually, interestingly, the first step, because I mean, that dovetails a lot into what I find, that people come along with a superficial symptom. So in your example, it might be lacking leadership skills and want to address that. But as in the case you've just been talking about, they're not in the headspace to do that. So there's actually an initial first step, which is asking, why are you not in the headspace? What is it that's going on internally with you? Because it's not that any of us sort of stand up and say, oh, I deliberately want to make a mess of my career or wreck my family or destroy my health or anything.
Far from it.
No, it's something subconsciously happening, that what appears to be self-sabotaging behavior is actually keeping us safe in some dynamic.
Yeah.
And it was probably a childhood pattern that we didn't realize we were carrying. And so the first step is actually to unpack and just let go of that. And then you move into the space where you can take on the coaching advice.
Yeah, I think it is, but sometimes people don't want to face up to that subconscious thought.
No.
And in this case, I don't think that person did. But something down the line will trigger the fact that they need to face it. So, and certainly last year, I had to face the way, and I'm certainly better at keeping stable now than I used to be with my weight, but I still need to get on and do some more work around it. And it's interesting, because you're right, what's subconsciously holding me back? Probably because I like too many nice things, and I think I see healthy food as boring, unappetizing, which is the wrong way. I need to change my thinking, but it's going to take a lot after all these years, isn't it?
Well, it's also acknowledging with all of this, it's a process. It's not something that just flicks overnight. I mean, yeah, occasionally it can, and it's lovely when that happens, but having the expectation that this is a journey to go on, and there's going to be different stages. Exactly. Yes.
And which is very much what I talk about with my clients. It's bite size.
Yeah.
And that certainly goes back to, I had this brilliant manager who really encouraged me. Once she knew she could trust me, she left me to it as an operational lead, and she was really the one that opened up my world. I can't thank her enough for that. And she would leave me to get on with it, but she would always be saying to me, bite size, Nicola, bite size, because I always wanted to change the world in one step. And you can't do that. You've got to do bite size.
No, that's wonderful. And obviously there's been people in your life that have led you to grow the business you're growing, and
absolutely
give back to other people. Yes. So I mean, you've mentioned quite a few tools and different survey types and everything. Is that something that people would need to work with you to get access to, or are they tools that a business could find and implement independently?
They could implement themselves. There's a lot of companies out there that do like staff survey tools. So there's a lot of things out there. Look about well-being, go and find out what's in your local area. I think certainly trainers will come in, won't they? And like yoga teachers, etc. If you want to give them a lunchtime space, why not think about it? I've seen Fitbit walking clubs where they provide Fitbits for the staff, and they have a challenge and things like that. But you need to be really diverse and look at the overall of your employees and have different types of things to meet all the needs, really. Certainly, because like, for instance, for me, I'd love to go to do networking that's walking, but I get angina pain quite often in my heart. So I have to really think, no, that's not going to be for me. So there are other things that I need to consider that I can do instead. So it is working with each individual, I think. and looking at overall what can I provide that will meet the different needs of the groups. So often we forget to do, don't we, people impact analysing and sort of looking at assessing what's going on in our business with the people. And I think that's something that probably we ought to be pushing more.
No, that's brilliant advice, and great to note that diversity. We need to make sure we're catering for everyone here. So I mean, gosh, there's been so much in this interview, so many pearls of wisdom, and thank you for sharing all of that. And I'd like to just finish up by asking you to let us all know how anyone can work with you, whether it's as an individual or as a company.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, Katie, and I really appreciate this opportunity, I would say pop along to my website at www.thepeoplementor.co.uk. There's loads of blogs and loads of podcasts on there. I'm on Spotify with my podcast, The People Mentor. I haven't recorded any recent ones in the last couple of months, I think, because we're having a bit of a break on the series, but we will be starting again, probably with interviews next, and I'm hoping to interview you, Katie. So
I'd love to. Thank you.
Invites there. But yeah, I think just go there and have a look around. If you're struggling, say, with difficult conversations, because I do a lot of work around difficult conversations and conflict, a starting block is just to get my journal off Amazon, because it helps you to know yourself better and then know your team, and then plan how you're going to have your conversations and what you need to think about. And it's quite comprehensive, lots of information in there, but lots of space for you to journal your thoughts while you're doing it. And I think it's so useful for any situation, really, because it starts with understanding yourself, and then the more you understand yourself, the better your relationships are going to be in the workplace.
Oh, 100%. I mean, your most important relationship is the one with yourself, and the way that looks is what gets mirrored out to everyone around you. So so that sounds amazing, and I'll make sure I include all those details in the description down below for anyone that's scared of missing those. So they'll all be written in the links and everything. And Nicola, it's been just brilliant. Thank you so much for giving your time today and sharing all the wisdom that you've developed through a wonderful career and the way in which you're just helping other people. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I could have talked to you for hours. That was really lovely, Katie. Thank you very much. And thank you for all for listening.
Thank you. And I will be back soon with another video, more interesting interviews, and lots more to help you find your energy.